Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review 2. So, going into this film, it was kind of easy for me to just, look at the runtime of, heck yeah, I'm going to review this film. An hour and 11 minutes. That would be the quickest review ever, because, even animated movies are, an hour and 25. So I'm like, heck yeah, I don't, it'll be weird having to eventually have made a thumbnail and all kinds of stuff for this, but conveniently I found the most appropriated esh picture to go along with this. So that's why this is the way it is, because I'm just yeah, hopefully I can conveniently come up with something for this one, because it doesn't feel like I can conveniently come up with a kind of easy approach. So, in all honesty, I have seen every single Human Centipede movie, and so I'm probably going to tag that movie along with this, because it's basically the same thing, where you end up having a person that is be attached to a person in this movie, and it kind of becomes like an escape room kind of film. But not only that, it kind of comes this mystery kind of film also. And so I'm like, okay, I want to see where this goes. I want to see how this is going to be presented. And so for those of you that have probably seen the Matt Damon film Stuck on You, it kind of feels like that, of how these people are attached. They're basically just attached by the stomach, but they're attached on the side of their stomach. So we eventually have these people waking up on top of one another, and so we of course have Sarah and David consistently trying to get off of one another, because these people are complete strangers to one another. And eventually, slowly but surely, we do end up finding the connection, pardon the pun here, of why these two are to be sewn together. And Sarah is to bring up her past, and David is to bring up his past. The only thing that I thought was really just kind of the downer upon this film is maybe the way of which that this movie is to end, because you're wanting there to be a Saw ending, if really there is to be this movie feels like Saw in some ways, because it technically does. We kind of have this ending where you're just okay, this is definitely not going to go the way that we would like it to go. But yeah, so we end up finding out some things about David and some things about Sarah. And then towards the end of this episode, we find out why exactly they are to possibly be perfect matches. And that's all I can really say. That's all I can really go into. Sarah's to mention about a lover of hers that is to seemingly be soon a ex-lover. And David, who is to just be this gigolo of sorts, is to have the only thing left for him at a home, which is to be some dog. So with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this one. There's not much for me to say that would almost feel like a spoiler at this point. So let's just go into it. Let's go out of our way to go into spoilers for this one. There's just I would say that this movie is interesting, but it's only interesting because the gimmick of the movie, that these two are connected, and then they're having to figure out this mystery of why that they're stuck in this room, complete strangers, and and to have to go and figure out what's really going on here. So let's go into it. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. I say like I should get into spoiler time because there's really just like it's just hey, check this out. It's interesting. I think that's all I can really say. It's interesting, but like I feel kind of like if I were to have had any kind of hope of this movie, like it was basically Bash. Yeah, I kind of left disappointed because I was expecting some kind of like Saw or like some kind of uh like ending out of this. I was expecting some kind of approach to this movie, and it feels like these people couldn't have been bothered. We spend so much time having these characters kind of laying around that when it seems like they are to actually go and do something, it just feels like, man, how much chunk of time did we have these two characters spend just kind of laying around? Because this is only an hour and XYZ movie, and X meaning 11 minutes. So like we had to really get going in here. We had to really get like trying to figure out what's going on here, and it feels like we're slow to the crawl with that one. So let's go into it. So like I said, both Sarah and David, they wake up laying on top of one another. We have Sarah consistently thinking that David is to be the prime suspect here, that he had sewn them together because like this guy must be that good at sewing a person and person together. So Sarah is trying to get out of bed, and David is like, please stop doing that. Like, you're hurting me. And so we have Sarah who's consistently telling David, like, why did you do this to me? And he's like, I didn't do anything. But it seems slowly but surely we have David who's very intelligent about things. It seems when he is to wake up, he's to realize that both of them had got like roofied or had gotten to some drug that is to turn them into zombies and then like have whoever like tie them together or stitch them together. So they go on and eventually have a look at how they're exactly attached together, and so they're like, oh my god, we're attached, we're sewn together. And so their immediate thing isn't to try to rip away from one another. Like the immediate reaction is just like, okay, we're just gonna lay here. But Sarah isn't thinking that. She's like, I want to get out of here. I want to leave. I want to feel like. And David is like, chill freaking out. We gotta assess what's going on here. And so when they eventually separate them, separate, meaning still laying in this bed, but they're kind of like their bodies aren't touching. We eventually now need to have them figure out what the connection here is, like who would be their enemy. And so Sarah is to say, it's like, well, the only person that would go on to be my enemy is probably my like husband. And like, do you have anybody, David? And David is just like, well, no, all I have is my dog. I just have my dog at home. And so they're trying to come up with like who could be the enemy of these characters and who could have done this. And so Sarah's thinking, it's like, well, it has to be my husband Mario. So we have these two characters go on and eventually try to get up because both of them actually have to use the bathroom. They have to go and they have to pee. So we have, of course, these two characters are to eventually get up. And so David isn't really telling who he is, but David is to spot something goofy with this remote, and he is to say that there's cameras all around this room. So David and Sarah get up from this bed, and so Sarah's to realize that David is to have a tan during the winter, and a number of other things that would kind of place him as some kind of person. And but so they both go to the bathroom, and David is to go and drink some water because he's dehydrated. And every time they're to go and drink or eat something, because they get lasagna sent to them later on, Sarah's like, well, what if it's poisoned? It's like, I'm sorry, I think whoever wants you here isn't going to try to drug you or poison you or whatever. They're going to try to give you, like, the best bet for you to get the heck out of here. Or otherwise, what is the point of all this? To just kind of, like, sew you together and then just, like, what is the real point here? So, both of them go off to the bathroom, and so Sarah goes first, and so David is to have to go and, like, put both of his knees onto the ground for, like, Sarah to go pee, and then we then have to switch places because then David is going to have to go and also pee. And so Sarah is just kind of, like, laughing about this just because it's like, God, this is insane. So after they go, they both go pee. I guess David wasn't going to go and stand while peeing. He actually goes and sits down. So we have it where Sarah, of course, is to ask David after she figures out that he's a gigolo. She's like, well, how exactly did you know about the remote? And so David is like, well, I know that remote because I've seen it before, because I've placed cameras in my rooms when I am to go on and have certain kind of clients so I can blackmail them later. And Sarah's like, oh my God, you rascal, you, like, God, I hate you. You're so lonesome. But consistently when David and Sarah, like, are to consistently look at one another, because they're so close, and you would think David would probably have a whiffy stiffy, like, consistently here, but maybe not. Maybe he's kind of learned how to just, like, you know what, like, I'm freaking, like, I'm with women all the time, so I know how to tame my manhood, so to speak. Trying to cryptically talk here, even though it's spoilers, kind of cryptically, you know. So, so David and Sarah, of course, are to consistently at random times lock lips, and every time they do, the lights go out. And so eventually, the more and more they do that, they're starting to realize that the lights are going out when they do that, but we'll get to that. So eventually David and Sarah are going to hear the phone ring, and so they end up picking it up, and it's to be some music, and Sarah recognizes it as her husband's music. And so supposedly the last thing that both of them remember is that David was going to get $8,000 uh, for some night with some woman, and like Sarah doesn't remember much of anything, but she ends up remembering some girl named Rita eventually when a photo is to be shown to her. Sarah is also not wearing her own earrings, and so she ends up taking them off. Then eventually David is to go and ask for these earrings to go and open up this one drawer, and is to, of course, that's when they find the picture there. So we eventually have both David and Sarah making it back to this bed, and so because both of them are really tired, and like both of them of course are very weak because not only have they been drugged, but then also they had this horrific surgery being done to them, and they've probably lost a lot of blood from this surgery. So eventually we go on, and eventually there is to be a phone call that both of them are to get up to go and get, and they answer it, and it ends up having to be some man's voice, which neither of them have ever heard before. And David grabs the phone and is to be very aggressive towards this guy, and he hangs up. So when both of them were to go to the bathroom, the lights were to go black, and a guy was to come in to go and give them medication, I guess to give them painkillers. And Sarah is to say, it's like, well, what if it's poison? What if it's a drug? And so David's just like, take it. It's a painkiller. So we really have it where, like, these two people here aren't going to die because of what's going on. So eventually how this all is to play out is that when both David and Sarah are to kiss, the lights go out. And so they're just like, well, hey, like, I think we need to go and take this further. And so eventually they are to put towels on their body, and they are, of course, to take these towels off. And so then all of a sudden this old man comes running in there like, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing that, blah, 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 blah. And so they end up going and taking this guy out and knocking him out. And so Sarah's asks, like, well, hey, like, is that guy injured? Because they ended up going and opening this window before, and they're kind of looking at like certain pictures in this area before, like, this whole big event was to happen. And so they open up this window to find that they're in some, like, paint museum, or some place that has a lot of paint on it, or like paint around it. So like it's like a fresh coat of paint has put into this location. So we also have like dogs and all kinds of animals like making sounds all over the gosh darn place. And so they keep hearing dogs or birds or whichever. So we go on and have these characters find some photo of a animal getting his nails clipped. And so David is to mention something about some guy that he saw at some point before with this kind of weird nail that kind of bugged him. So now we're back at the spot where this old man is to be unconscious, and supposedly Sarah's to look at this guy, and she's to say it looks just like her husband Mario. And so now we have them go through this door that has been opened by this older man. And so they go through this stretch of hallway to eventually find out, because they're trying to connect the pieces of why exactly like they had been chosen to be here. And every single thing that they're coming up with, like, they don't live around the same place, they don't they're not in the same circles, like they've never really met one another, and so on and so forth. Sarah eventually, before she's to get out of this room, is to confess to supposedly Mario that she had cheated on him numerous times, but again, that's not why she's here either. So we go on through this hallway, and all of a sudden we see this numerous things of pictures of these conjoined twins. And we end up finding out that these two twins at some point were, like, these two people were conjoined, and via surgery they got unconjoined. And David is like, well, hey, like, when I was a child, like when I was like when blah, blah. David was to mention that he had a scar. And so he's like, oh, so like that's it. Because we had Sarah, who's to mention that her husband loved the number 2 because it wasn't as binary and whatever as like zeros and ones and whatever, like it was a prime number. And so weirdly, husband had this weird addiction to the number 2, like as if he was going to take a So Sarah and David make their way past this hallway to make it past this door to find all these pets that had been conjoined. All of these weird animals eventually being conjoined together. And so while these two are making it past this one hallway with all these pictures, we end up seeing the old man roll away from where he was to be supposedly be dead. And so we had at one point both Sarah and David breaking a mirror into this bathroom that they were in. And David was starting to try and cut the things that were keeping them together. He started to try to cut them so they could separate them. But they found out that there was parts of flesh that had gone missing also. So if they were to really start to cut them, like, they would start to bleed. So, and bleed heavily, possibly. So David and Sarah are to, of course, go out to eventually find this old man back into the fray of both Sarah and David, while Sarah is to go and find her gun that she was to have on her, because evidently she had a gun to protect herself from her lover Mario. So they both go off to speak to this old man, and we end up finding out that this old man is evidently their father, weirdly. And so he wanted to keep them here and, like, keep them tied together because, like, they will work better together than apart. What a weird creepo. So we eventually have it where we have this father and we have both Sarah and David who are rustling over this gun to eventually have David or Sarah shoot this man. He falls over, but we also find out that David is also shot in the leg also. So now David is telling Sarah, it's like, well, hey, we need to cut away from each other so that way one of us can make it out of here, because not both of us are going to make it out. So, like, here's your opportunity to get the heck out of here. So because if I hadn't mentioned, it's like I've seen all of the Human Centipede movies, and so eventually we have it where somebody's gonna either have to, like, rip away from somebody, and it, like, that looks so awful, or eventually we have it where there are to be certain characters within the centipede that eventually die off for whatever reason, and then the other people are left to now have to figure out how to either escape or to just figure out how to die themselves, or realize that this is like they're stuck here now. They're stuck. There's nowhere for them to go. They're gonna die, and it's gonna happen the slowest and horrible process, but it's gonna happen nonetheless because this person has nowhere to go. They're stuck. So we then have, of course, Sarah going and finding this letter opener, and she's having problem cutting them away from one another. And so David goes and tries to sharpen this, and then has her retry it. And so she separates herself from David and starts to make her way to open up this door, but she's having problems with it. So eventually she finds this key, opens the thing up, thinking that they're going to make their way to a normal like town somewhere. And basically both of these people are to have been walking around without any clothes on, no towel, no nothing. So Sarah all of a sudden has to open the door to find out that they're basically in the middle of nowhere and she has nowhere to go. That they're basically out in the wintry mountains of nowhere, and she is to go on to make it to this other house, hoping there's a phone or something like that there. But then eventually Sarah is to collapse, and because I guess she's bleeding too much, and she just collapses because of the cold, and also just because like she's bleeding. So Sarah falls over, and Sarah is to die. And of course, David is to die because he was not only like torn from Sarah, but then also he has this other gun injury. But before David is completely die here, the old man is to go and wrestle with the gun with David again, just for David to shoot this old man and kill him for sure this time. And then David is to basically just huddle into the fetal position and then slowly but surely die because he has nowhere to go. As well as Sarah has nowhere to go. And then so, like, this old man is to mention, like, well, hey, like, you guys would have survived if you were together. Like, you went and tore yourself apart, and now you're going to die because of it. I honestly think they wouldn't have made it either way. Like, I think that either, like, could seem like they were so weak. Like, I don't think that they were really and truly going to make it out of here. I think it was just, they were going to die regardless. Like, whether they did nothing, whether they did something, either way, they were probably going to die. So, with that said, like, the movie just ends with, like, both of them, like, in this weird yin-yang of a circle, dying together, and that's just how the movie ends. I'm like, man, that sucks. So there isn't, like, a happy ending out of all this? And, like, I guess there was meant to be, but still, like, we end up having it, of course, be that, like, both these characters both died, and it's not like a Saw situation where, like, eventually the whole ordeal is for them to separate and for them to make it out of there, but, like, they don't. They just die. So that really just, like, that sucked. But it's like, oh well, like, it was an hour and 11-minute movie. So it's like, meh, okay. So there is that then. We eventually find out that David is some random character and Sarah's some random character that eventually didn't even realize that they were conjoined twins at some point, that I guess got adopted out, and their biological father found them and put them back together, so to speak. What a weird, goofy story. It feels so random. So yeah, so with that said, I think that's all that I wanted to say about this movie. I probably didn't go into much detail because I don't know. There isn't much to really say in here besides all of the just straight up just having Sarah consistently blaming David for all of this. And David's like, dude, I'm in the same boat you are. And Sarah's like, I don't think so. Like, I think you put this all together. I think you orchestrated all of this, and so on and so forth. And David's like, no, I didn't. Like, believe me. As they randomly kiss one another for whatever goofy reasons. Um, but yeah, so with that said, I think I want to get out of here because I think that's all that I wanted to say about this movie, and I probably took far too long to talk about it. So I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.